On this episode of Unbillable, we're back in the office, and while other people throw rocks, I'm a lawyer. I put a pen to paper. It would be so much easier for me to skip this episode of Unbillable. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I mean, I pride myself on never really lying to you guys, my unbillies. This is by far the most hotly debated topic we've ever had before the camera was even turned on. Like I said, it would be easy just to shut this thing off and not discuss what's happening all across the nation right now. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I don't see myself running into the streets and shouting almost anything. And it doesn't mean that I think that it's wrong to protest. I'm a complete fan of freedom of speech. I actually have other episodes where I talk about freedom of speech in a greater way than the state will even protect you, right? I think protesting and your ability to push back against the government is a fundamental right. It's like as American as it gets. I've many times said the First Amendment is not about protecting the speech of you, but protecting the speech of those who you disagree with. Now, when it comes to this topic, I don't know if we're all in total agreement, but I think most of us generally agree that something needs to be done. We can't just continue on the same path that we're on. And although I don't find myself as a California licensed attorney running into the streets to join the protesters, I also didn't find myself sitting at home just posting on Instagram as being enough. And don't get me wrong, if you sat at home and just posted some things on Instagram about what's going on in the world, I'm okay with that. But for me, that wasn't enough. And if I'm not gonna go into the streets, I had to start thinking, what is it that I would do? And so I decided to write my state representatives in the US Congress, Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris. I mean, I am a lawyer. What do lawyers do? We write letters. And we're gonna talk about what I wrote in my letter on this episode of the vlog. Any good lawyer will tell you before you pick up a pen to write, before you pick up a keyboard to write your letter, you're gonna have to do some research. You're gonna have to find the information that's gonna support your positions. It's no different for me in this letter that I've written. In fact, I had the three principles, the three general ideas that I wanted to share with the Congress people, but I used my internet along with some of my resources I have as an attorney to find some support for these positions. The first topic I thought of was just the fact that we keep adding new laws to our books. Every year we adopt new laws. So rarely do we ever make a law that actually goes away or removes other laws. Now, some laws have a sunset provision, and a sunset provision just means that when the law is written, we include a date by which it will go away, a date it will sunset, if not extended. But the vast majority of our laws just get added to the books. Added and added and added. In fact, in the last 25 years, we've added over 1,000 new crimes. So if you think about it, we're talking about freedom and security. And you don't want to give up too much freedom in exchange for security, or at least the idea or concept of security. And also, if you think about it from the policeman's perspective, by having so many laws to enforce, all you're really doing is constantly enforcing laws. You become like a never-ending patrol person. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I remember the policemen being a little bit more like accessible to me, more willing to talk to me about what they were doing or their experiences as a police officer. I don't think that's unique to me and where I grew up. In fact, when I was living at USC, I had similar experiences with law enforcement in the area. The idea being you have to give the law enforcement and the public more of a reason to interact besides just when they show up to put you in handcuffs. Having more interaction would help reduce the stress and the public distrust of law enforcement. Reducing the number of laws would also do the same thing. Once we establish that there's probably too many laws and too many ways to get into prison, the next thing we need to talk about is the prison itself. In America, we have a number of private prisons. What does that mean? They're prisons run by private enterprise. That makes the prison a for-profit business. Think about that for a second. Have you ever considered a prison as a for-profit enterprise? The fact that the prison becomes a for-profit enterprise does a number of things. Number one, it creates an incentive for the prison to have less staff. If you have less staff, you have less expense and the ability to potentially make more money. However, in a prison setting, if you have less staff, you potentially have more violence, and more violence is going to make your prisoners have to stick around a little bit longer, if you follow what I'm saying. But if you're in a private prison, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You kind of want the prisoners to stick around longer. because that's how you get paid. See, it's a circle about money driving prisoners to stay in prison longer. The private prison enterprise actually having lobbyist groups that try to encourage the creation of laws that have longer sentences, or maybe you've heard the phrase mandatory minimum sentences. The privatization of prisons is something that we really need to think about, something we really need to think about closely. Should a prison be a profitable enterprise for the government, for private citizens? We talked about how there's maybe too many laws, too many ways, too many crimes that are going to get you into the prison. We talked about the prisons being privatized and being sort of for profit and why that might not be the best idea. But the last piece of this, probably the most difficult piece of this, is how to combat the actual police brutality. One of the things that's being highlighted right now is the concept of qualified immunity for police officers. And this is something that I think really should be reconsidered. Qualified immunity protects police officers when they do something wrong. Now, I'm talking about it in a very blanket manner, that's true. But the qualified immunity that's provided is also provided in sort of a blanket manner. For me, I kind of look at my own personal experiences and just want to remind people that the system is designed to have like a neutral judge, an actual neutral judge, working with a district attorney, just a lawyer, involving the prosecution of a crime against a defendant. In other words, the system kind of thinks that nobody knows each other. It's a neutral judge. It's a district attorney. It's a defense attorney and a defendant. But in reality, it doesn't exactly work like that. See, the same judge takes the bench in the same courtroom every single day. The same district attorney works in that same courtroom on a lot of those same days. It's the defense attorneys that are the ones that are really changing. I mean, whether they're a public defender or private defense attorneys, they're coming into the courtroom to defend a different client. That same courtroom with the same judge and the same DA, who of course build a rapport over time. Now, I don't want to imply, and I definitely don't want to say, that just because they build a little bit of a rapport that a judge would lose their ability to be neutral. But I will say the following. I've been in courtrooms where the DA is dating a police officer, where the judge is married to a police officer. I've been in a courtroom where the DA is dating a police officer and the judge in the same courtroom is married to a police officer. And the only person that doesn't know these relationships is the defense attorney and probably his client, the defendant. So when I think about qualified immunity, I think about the system as a whole. You already have a district attorney who's built a rapport with the judge. You already have a district attorney that works day in and day out with law enforcement. And now when something goes wrong, you ask that same district attorney to prosecute the law enforcement. I have a hard time doing business in real estate cases against anybody I know. I can't even imagine being asked to prosecute a police officer that I've made friends with. I think it would be very difficult to expect those people to give it their all. And in some situations, they maybe just aren't. So removing qualified immunity and creating an entire separate branch or division to prosecute police for misconduct, and not just prosecute, investigate, and then if warranted prosecute, is probably a good idea. I'm not against police officers. I understand that there are many that do nothing wrong. But I saw a social media post that kind of compared police officers to pilots, meaning it only takes one bad pilot to do a lot of harm, and similarly, it only takes one bad police officer to do a lot of harm. After major plane crashes, we launch massive investigations. We have entire sects of the government pursuing the little black box, maybe you've heard of it, trying to think of what's been recorded from the accident. Why not take similar steps to protect the citizenry if it's needed? So whether it's Minneapolis, Atlanta, Detroit, Los Angeles, New York, or right here in our Coachella Valley, it sure seems like it's time for a change. And if this lawyer's not going to hit the streets with the protesters, this lawyer's going to hit that pen to the paper, because that's what lawyers do. And if you want to keep up with other things lawyers do, be sure to hit the subscribe button over there and catch another episode of Unbillable by clicking right down here.